Hey there, I'm Janice Bennett, and I want to thank you so much for joining me on this adventure podcast. I wanted to take some time, this first episode, um, to say who I am. Like, who is Janice Bennett, and how the heck did we get here? Like, I even ask myself that question sometimes of what is this darn journey that I've been on? So, um, this launching of this podcast actually is starting off my birthday and whopping, we'll just say in the plus 50 category. So I, am new to this and want to say that I guess there's never too old to teach an old dog. Never too, what is that saying? It's never too soon to teach an old dog new tricks. I don't know. I'm probably getting that wrong. All right, enough rambling. So who the heck am I and how did we get here? So, I've thought about this a lot. And I probably have struggled a lot even with my own insecurities of like the stuff that I happen to know. And probably is the reason why this is delayed even being out there to the world in terms of what it is that I do and how I can help people and what it is that I want to do. All right, so here's the scoop. Reader's Digest version, if you will, of 50 plus years in a nutshell, if we can do that. But I'll try to be explaining how we got here and where I'm hoping to go and see where we go from there. So, I always had a pony from the time I was a little girl. Got one when I was a year old. I probably was spoiled a bit. My dad did like horses as well, and so got a pony. And I didn't grow up in a world or in an environment that I actually had access to taking lessons or studying the art of riding horses. I certainly was all through the school of hard knocks. Got my pony when I was, as I mentioned, just a year old, and then somewhere in that journey we ended up determining that he wasn't the right pony and we had to get another one for me, which was great. And so anyway, all was good. And then when I was about 7 years old, we moved. And unbeknownst to me, they sold my pony because I didn't really notice it because we didn't keep him at home. He was always kept at a friend's house. And then we'd go there to visit. So it wasn't out of character to not to be able to go to the barn to check on my pony anyway. And so we moved and I wanted to go see him, and that's when they broke the news to me that they sold him. And actually my dad broke the news to me, and I certainly held that over his head for a lot of years, a lot of years. Really resented that situation, but I get over that and we get over that. But over the years, so I continued. So I didn't have the pony for a while and begged and pleaded and got another one eventually when I was about 12. And, again, didn't have access to the resources of how to properly ride or anything. It was just all through what I thought was correct. And away we went. So over then the next several years through my teenage years, then the other challenges that happen when you're a girl sometimes is that you start to develop more interests in other activities or boys and stuff like that. So over that time, the horses became less of a priority. So then I found myself not involved with them again. But even in my younger life, I thought, always become a vet. That was what my aspiration was. I wanted to be a vet. And I found myself working on a farm that I was supported by the farmer, and he kept encouraging me to if I wanted to go on and study to that I would be able to do that. So anyway, I took a lot of science classes in school. Like I did the thing that you're supposed to do, right? I took all of my like college prep math and college prep sciences, and I did all that heavy lifting really in those younger years of high school. And it's funny, I always struggled with English, like English as being the class for me. I certainly failed every year in English. No wonder I even graduated high school. That's another story. Anyway, so I found myself though in grade 12, like so our last year in high school, that I had taken pretty much all of my requirement sciences, and I just had to take a couple of other courses to finish my graduation. And I found myself taking college, like the grade 12 biology, and I found myself struggling wildly with the concepts, with being able to do the tests, with being able to even get a passing mark. Like it was I was just devastated because I was studying and I was studying and I was studying and I knew the material, and then I would like barely pass the test, because the tests for me at that time were always multiple choice, multiple guess, if you will, and I was always guessing wrong. Like there was just like that one word in the question that would throw me off. So if you remember, I did say I was always failing English in my first semester. It wasn't until like a lot of years later that I realized, well, actually that's not true. I did realize in high school, in about grade 10, that I was struggling with reading to comprehend. I couldn't keep up with comprehending like all the other classmates that I had. Like they could read Shakespeare and do very well at it and read all these books in a weekend, and I couldn't do that. I could read and I could spell really well, and I could definitely do that, but my brain space just kept going in other directions. I could not read a paragraph to then be able to tell you, even if it was only 3 sentences, to even be able to tell you what the paragraph was even about, because I had gotten distracted that quickly. So anyway, this was some of the challenges that I was dealing with. So back to this test, and I'm starting to realize that it was like sometimes that little question, like it was and instead of an or something silly like that, that tripped me up as I was reading, and I would inevitably then get the question wrong. So there I was starting to find myself not doing very well in grade 12 biology. And I was also taking these extra courses that I needed to just take some extra courses to fill in the time. And long hold right about then, we were just starting to get the computer in the classrooms. And I was taking this computer course. And I remember one of the things that they asked us to do is we had to kind of build like a program. And I guess it probably would have been, maybe it was Lotus 123 or whatever it would have been back in that day. We didn't have Excel or Google Sheets, or that stuff didn't exist then. And I remember taking the income tax return and building a calculating income tax return so that when people put in their information, the formulas worked so that they could compute the answer to the, to what your refund might be. Whether I was right or not, I don't know, but that's what I worked on. And so anyway, so that was great. I really enjoyed it. And so I remember it was right around January. And I was really starting to pay attention to all of my other classmates who were like filling out applications to university and getting all these acceptance letters and stuff like that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what am I going to do? I don't want to go to college to be a vet. I don't think I can pass. Like, I don't think I have the wherewithal to actually, even I was identifying myself at that time that I didn't even think that I had the way to be able to sit down and study the material. Like, I didn't think I even had that kind of obedience, if you will, if that's the word. It's not really the word, but that structure to be able to sit down and study and really put in it. And I felt like, you know what, I'm not willing to invest to go to college or even apply. I don't think I'm going to do it. I don't think I'm going to make it. I don't think it's going to be for me. And so this wasn't about me saying I couldn't do something. This was about me trying to figure out what could I do. And so along about that same amount of time, I hadn't really heard a lot of this at the time, but we had a vocational school back in the day where a lot of folks who would have gone from not being able to be taking some of their high school programs would go off to vocational school and study, finish up their grade 12s, and at the same time get a trade. So I was actually completing my high school, but I do remember that there was a stigma certainly associated with going to vocational school. Right about that same time, it was changing from being a vocational school to a community college. So I looked at some of the programs. Now, this is classic in terms of how you figure out what it is that you want to do. So I started looking at the programs that they offered. And also back then, there was a bus system. So I actually could get to the college via the school bus, which was something that, was then again, back in the day, took that barrier out from being able to go. It was also free at that time still. And so there was all these things that were kind of checking the positive box. So I started looking at what programs that they offered. And there were two that were of interest to me, because I remember I said I started taking the computer course in high school. So they had two computer courses that were of interest. In the business side of it, to me, I thought, oh, business makes sense. There was a business computer operator and there was a business computer programmer. So when I was looking at which one do I take, funny thing though, I looked at the fact is that one was one was a 1-year course, but it had a prerequisite of another program, a 1-year program that you had to take before you could take the business computer operator course. So you had to take another program, then you could go into business computer operator. So the business computer programming course was a 2-year course, and you just direct entry and you would come out with something. So for me, it was like, well, just go into the one, like that makes more sense. Again, high school brain, not necessarily all thinking about all the things of how to choose the right program for you, but that's how I chose. It's what it was. So I chose it. And I remember like their maximum was 10 students. And so like I felt like I was like, this was great. But funny story, I almost didn't get in, because remember I said I couldn't read well to comprehend. So one of the things back then is that we had to do a test to be able to get into the program, like to get officially accepted. And so I had to go in and meet with the instructor and do this test, pre-test. And we had to read this document, and then she would come back in and ask some questions. So this was done individually. So they put me in the teacher's, I guess, resource room at the time, and I read this short story. While I was reading the short story, there were people that kept coming in and using the photocopier. And so away went my brain. And when she came back in and she started asking me the questions, I just looked at her and I was just like this drawn blank face. It was like, I don't have an answer. I can't answer that. I don't know. And she's like, and she looked at me right in the face and she said, "Can't you read?" And I just about melted. I'm like, yes, I can read. I just can't read to comprehend. I got all these distractions that kept coming in. And like, while I was reading, like, I just kept losing my focus. So thankfully, she gave me another chance. She got up, she went to the door, locked the door, and she gave me another one. And she sat right there with me and I read it. man, was I stressed. I mean, she was this little tiny little person, and like scared the bejesus out of me. But anyway, she sat there with me. I read that little short one pager. She asked me some questions and I answered them and I got in. And I remember, like, being in such gratitude for that opportunity. And I also then remember telling the farmer that I decided that I wasn't going to go to vet college because I didn't think that I could make it. And I remember him believing in me and, saying, like, listen, like, we'll figure it out if you really want to go. And so there I was, like, still, I'm now accepted into this community college, which now has the stigma and all these things, and everybody else is going to university. And I was still like, should I go to vet college? And so in the end, I said, no, I think this is the right choice for me. And it turned out that it was. As I mentioned, they only take 10 students. And one of the things that she told us on the first day of class, I remember it, she was like, I don't give honors. Like, it doesn't happen. You're going to work your tail off, but don't worry, you're not going to get an honors. And, she was right. We did work our tails off. And I graduated top 2 in my class with honors. And I was like, I couldn't believe that it happened. And the deal was really is that I was choosing to be there, right? I chose to go that route. And the total change in terms of like how that experience was for me. Unbelievable. Did I turn out to be a computer programmer? Nope. Because that's the cool thing about sometimes journeys of life and how we actually roll and where we go. At the time, based on when I was graduating, so that was in 91 that I was graduating from the college. And back then, there were a lot of opportunities for programmer, junior programmer, analysts, and stuff like that. And I did apply. Like, I applied to a lot of positions. They were in the city. So, being from Nova Scotia, I lived always my entire life in a rural, very rural community. But I was willing to go to the city, I thought. But turns out probably I didn't, hard to say, but my energy was definitely saying no, because I never once got an interview for any of those positions. So, probably there was a reason for that. But anyway, also the other thing really I think about the time is that back then it was really difficult to get a job, because in any form, because there were a lot of those boomers were taking up the job force at the time in which I was certainly graduating. And that was always a challenge with a lot of people, is being able to get a job after university or high school or college, because there just weren't available. Anyway, okay, so I ended up being successful though after that. While I did end up working at a couple of restaurants, a little ice cream serving stand and a restaurant in a mall, that following January I had an opportunity to apply for a position in a nonprofit organization who was looking for somebody to set up their computer systems for their office. And so I was like, okay. And I applied. So actually it was a funny story. So in Christmas of that, December of that year, I actually decided, like, I had been applying for all these jobs and I was really finding it difficult because I was always on shift working at the restaurant, and maybe not being able to go to an interview just when I needed to be able to go, or didn't feel like I could, like I'd feel guilty. And I didn't always know what my shift schedule was week to week. So anyway, so back then you could actually quit your job and still get unemployment insurance. So I put in my notice. I decided I needed to not be tied down to this job so that I could get the job that I thought that I wanted. And so I remember the family being like really, trying to talk me out of this because it wasn't a very popular decision at the time, but I was committed to like, I'll be fine. I think this is fine. And, back then you're not quite out on your own. So some of the expenses that you have, you don't have so I was okay. I felt anyway. So I gave my 2 weeks notice. I worked my last shift on a Saturday, and my instructor from community college called me. So now we're in January. After I graduated, she calls me on a Monday and says, I've got this opportunity. There's a guy that's been looking for somebody to actually help set up their computer systems, wondering if you're interested, if you're available. They've been having a time trying to find somebody to do this. If you're interested, here's the number. So I called the man, and he said, gave me the information. And so I sent him my resume later that day or the next morning. And on Wednesday, I went to an interview with him, and I walked out of that interview with a job. And I started the next Monday. I didn't even get to apply for unemployment. Like, I was not off work long enough to be able to apply for unemployment, which is like really cool, right? So that job turned into, it was supposed to be a 3-month job, and that was the amount of funding that they had available. So I go and I work there, and I'm setting up their computer systems and getting it all connected to their network, and started to set up then their accounting system. And they had the true shoebox accounting, like all of the receipts were in a shoebox. And so I took the time to start working through all of that and getting it all set up, and started to develop these systems and processes. In that short 3 weeks or 3 months, they were seeing the value that I was able to contribute to the organization. And as a result, they offered me an extension and for another year to be able to work for them and continue on. And so I continued on, and in turn, it ended up extending into a 7-year position. Well, it's still ongoing. I stayed for 7 years. How's that? So annually, though, my position always got renewed, but here was this chance that I took. I was working in a restaurant, not really finding the job, left it, got an offer like the next week, and was in a job the following week in 3 months, and then extended. Anyway, and I went on to do a lot of cool things. But it was time to look for something else, because I was commuting a very long distance. It was about an hour and a half each way, which, back then didn't seem like a big deal in one sense. A lot of people travel that or wait that much time, I guess, commuting when they're in the city, just in traffic. But anyway, I wanted something better, and I ended up looking for another job, and ended up working back at the college that I had graduated from, different campus, but ended up going back to that. And anyway, so I'll skip those last 23 years, but the point is in all of this, I've always worked on figuring out ways to do things more efficient and becoming more tech savvy and figuring all of that stuff out. But that's how I ended up wanting to be a vet, getting computer programming, and then turning into somebody who really likes the tech side of things, and as I say, developing the systems and efficiencies. I've gone on now to be a manager, and so it's been rather interesting. And thinking about the reason that I wanted to be a vet had a lot to do with horses. Like, I wanted to spend all my time with the horses, although it turns out probably going the vet route was probably wise that I didn't, because there was also other things that happen in that world that I hadn't thought of that are not so great of a lifestyle. We'll just say that. And turns out being able to get the jobs that I was able to get actually offered me the opportunity to be able to have the horses that I had and be in that kind of environment that I wouldn't have otherwise probably had the other way. So in the end, I see it as this positive. All right, so that's kind of, that nutshell of the tech side of me. But so then how does this other side, this horsemanship side that I'm so interested in, come into play? Well, so I've raised a few horses and trained a few horses. And when I say a few, it's like in my world, that's like a few, like tiny little bit compared to, I don't have access to hundreds of horses and stuff like that. But I have done, some of this work myself. And I have always taken on a project. We'll just say that. Usually I end up with something that's a little bit more challenging than others are willing to take on. And I get that for all the different reasons. Anyway, so I've often found myself in these things. And I've also had horses in my past that they were good for what they knew. They were good for what I knew, because I certainly didn't know a lot back again. So I'm still a lot of years before I start to take any formalized lessons and training and anything like that. I did in my ish 20s, but really to actually develop myself as a person with horse experience and really paying attention to horsemanship, I was certainly well into my 40s when that became more of a priority for me on that level. Holy moly. So anyway, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that even back then there were horses that I had in my life that I chose to sell because they were not doing the thing that I wanted to be able to do. And those were the reasons that I made at that time. I now have different reasons for why I keep horses. I'm not opposed to selling because I do, I like to buy. I buy horses, so I need someone to sell for me to be able to buy. But my point here is, where am I going with this story? So where the Off the Line podcast idea comes into play is that originally one of my challenging horses is a horse that I learned with how to go offline and do Liberty work with. And he's one that I raised, and I did all the things that I thought that I am supposed to do with training him from the beginning. And so, as I mentioned, I didn't necessarily have access to a lot of resources before. So like I've raised 3 foals in my life. First one, he sold him as a yearling, and that was, he probably, would be about 30 or so now. The second one is, she's 24 now at the time. And then the third one, he's 14. So I haven't, not even close to being a colt starter. But what I've done is, with him, I did the same thing that I did with her, which I had done, I thought, reasonably well with. Turns out, every person, every horse, every creature is different, and it wasn't working for he and I as a partnership the way that we were doing that. So I had to go back all the way and go, he's about 6 years old at this time, and I had to literally go all the way back to ground zero. And so when we say that, when we start doing groundwork, I always believed that we did groundwork until we started riding. And then once you start riding, you don't do groundwork anymore. And so, he was 3 when I started riding him, and he was 5 and 6 years old, and he was giving me the eject button on a regular basis. And he didn't just say, please get off. He was like, get off now. And it was not fun. And I was really questioning, my time with him and what was I going to do with him. And I should also mention that when he was 4, he not really sure, had an incident, and it impacted his eye, his left eye. And we tried to save it for a couple of weeks, but we're not successful. So I had to have it removed. And so I don't know if, like, I do know during some of that time, like I went through a very intense grieving process. He was over it right away. I grieved and resented him, I think, for a long time. And anyway, so here we are, he's 6 years old and it's not going well. Someone's going to die. And it's probably going to be me. And in fact, actually, I was leading him to the riding ring, and something spooked him out of the eye that he could see on. I was leading him on his left side, and he ran over top of me. Like, went over top of me, my face went down into the dirt, and I had dirt in my teeth. Like, I didn't even have a chance to close my mouth. Like, I hit the dirt. And I remember, that was not a cool experience. I remember being angry, like wildly angry at myself. I mean, I was angry at him, but I knew it was me. Like, there was something that I needed to do, and we needed to do it pronto. So I ended up spending some time researching, looking online, and discovered a clinician who was putting out a lot of videos, and started studying his work, and started going back to all the way back to the beginning, and working through that. And anyway, so we'll try to fast forward the story, but over the time we started developing and getting better, and we did all the groundwork. And I remember a neighbor came over, and I was so proud. I was showing her the work that I had done to help him be better. And I remember doing this effort, and I was showing her, and she said to me, "That's great, Janice, but why are you continuing to do that when he's clearly telling you that he's not comfortable?" I was like, well, no, he's standing right there. Like, look at him. He's just standing right there. We were standing right there, just like this, right tight. I didn't see that. And so that moment was like the pivotal moment for me on a lot of things. And I'm sure I'm still missing things, but that moment right there was when I learned to observe and see what I was seeing. Now, I didn't always know why I was seeing it. I didn't always know what I might be seeing or what to do when I saw it. But I started to pay attention to what I was seeing. And from there, that started to change a lot of the stuff that I do now. And so over the last number of years, so I guess 8 years, that I've just really spent a lot of time working on me getting better and paying attention to, what the horses are doing and stuff like that. So I won't go into all the details of all that stuff on this one, because this is really about, like, who am I and how did we get here? And I'm trying to not be rambling, too wildly bad. Hopefully you're still with me. But this is my story. This is the journey that I've gone on. And the reason that I guess I'm so passionate about both those things is that's who I am. Like, I have this background with all the horses, kind of doing all the things and being in that world. I have this paying attention to what they're doing. Now I have a bit of a herd. I have 5 in my little herd, and I watch them interact, and I'm able to use that as a kind of even like helping me understand and watch how they work. And then, even people, like, how do people work together, and how do teams work together, and leadership that way, and all that stuff that goes along with that. And then I have, like, my actual trade, if you will, training on being a computer programmer. Even though I don't do computer programming per se, I've gone on to, I build websites all the time. I'm enjoying doing that. To some extent, I will say I like some of it. I'm not the hard coder of websites, but I'd like to do that work. I like creating forms. I love an Excel file. I love a good formula. So it turns out way back in the day when I created that document on the income for the income tax return, it turns out like that was, the thing that I really enjoy doing is figuring out how to write a cool formula to do something more easy. I love to create forms. I love to do horse show organization in the sense of how to be more efficient and um how to help a show organizer have a really successful show with with the folks that are coming in and registering. For a number of years I would organize different shows, and I often would hear people commenting like just how much easier it is to do it, how more efficient, like it's all organized and they know what's going on and they're able to find the information. And so all these things that they've been able to do, it's a little bit techy, but it's making it easier for them. And, so trying to figure out how do I help others do that as well to become more successful with their shows. That's kind of another goal of mine to build. I've built my own database through my knowledge of my programming knowledge to build my own show database to be able to actually take the registrations and be able to print out, the class rosters, class lists, to be able to, calculate points at the end of the day, like all those things, because it just makes life easier. How does that help then the announcer in the office? So that's another area that I'm exploring and quite interested in, and helping. I guess I really want to help those that are in the equine industry as well, whether you're actually in the equine industry as doing that as a business, or perhaps you're in the equine industry like you yourself have horses and stuff like that. So you understand that language, but maybe you have another business, like your business is not related to the horses, but it's related to something else. But maybe being able to use the analogies that I talk about or that we have in common with horses and being able to help understand some of that tech side of things. So that's where I'm, hoping that this is going to go. I don't know, but what I do know is that if we don't start, how do you know you're going to get there, right? Like, I'm very adventurous, love to like go down the path untraveled, like to see where the next road gets me. And, and if I make a wrong turn, like sometimes there's something really cool that happens. And then sometimes you realize, well, that was a great detour, and get back on the road again. So, I don't know all the places that we're going to go with this podcast, but I do know that I've got a lot of topics. I know that I want to talk to quite a few people who've helped me on my journey with the horses, but then also blend in, like, how does that also work in the actual, business environment? Because I really want to help people become more organized, be more efficient. And maybe it's that you do volunteer work for a organization club that you help them organize like a fundraising event for their horse shows or something. I don't know. Like, I don't know what it's going to look like. All I know is that it's important to go, right? It's important to say what it is that I've got for my information. And one of the things that I always enjoy is like learning from other people, right? Like, so what are they going to tell me about how they might do something? And I'm like, that is where I'm just all in all the time. Like, how can I make this better? How can I make this better? How can we get more efficient with that? And sometimes, it's going through all the things and then figuring out a way to make it, better for the next time. But we may have to feel the pain and then, get through it. Anyway, I really like the learning, and I really like that tech side of it. And it turns out, even though I always almost failed English, just and it's fascinating because I didn't think that I'd have the wherewithal to actually stay with something, and study the vet side of things and really understand all those technical words. And you know what? I don't even a lot of the times on the tech side of it as well. Like for me, I always remember struggling with some of that stuff. So, but how then could I make it make sense to the next person? Like, how can I make that make sense? So anyway, I'm hoping that that's what this is going to be. I hope that it's going to be helpful for you. And thank you so much for still being here and with me to the end of this video. Or I guess if you're listening to this on the podcast, thank you for being here and I appreciate you. And until next time, be awesome.